Welcome to Unit 24 for the Digestive Anatomy for Anatomy and Physiology students in the lab. Now, in this chapter, we're going to be talking about digestive system, also known as gastrointestinal system or GI tract. Basically, this is a system used to take in the nutrients, break them down, and eventually allow the cells to absorb all these different molecules like carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and others into the cells in order for cells to survive and to function properly. Now, before the cells can actually obtain these nutrients, there's a kind of a slow and long process through which multiple different organs are involved, both the main digestive organs and the accessory digestive organs, in order to get that sandwich or whatever you're eating broken down into smaller, easily absorbable molecules. Now, what are the main functions of the digestive tract? Essentially, it's ingestion, right? Eating the food, putting it in the mouth, swallowing the food. Mechanical processing, which is how when you're using the muscles, the teeth and the tongue to chew and physically break down the food in your mouth. Remember, as you're doing that, it's also mixed in with saliva. So there's parts of secretion and chemical digestion taking place there. So anytime some kind of a chemical like an enzyme is secreted in the body, it helps to mix in with the nutrients to help them break them down easier and better for the rest of the body. So overall, as the food gets broken down further and further, as it goes deeper into the stomach and other organs, we also obviously encounter other parts of chemical digestion where more complex enzymes are used to break down into the food into individual molecules. And eventually, there's going to be absorption of these small molecules into the bloodstream and sometimes into the lymphatics, and essentially allowing them to migrate to the rest of the body, to all the cells. Later on, deeper in the digestive system, as we're coming to the end of this process, in the large intestine, we begin to see signs of compaction, or essentially dehydration, removal of final amounts of water from the food, and preparation for waste removal. And ultimately, when the waste is removed, we call this process defecation. So again, we start with ingestion and go through all of these processes as we go through these organs, and ultimately wind up with removal and excretion of waste, which we call defecation. Now, obviously, this topic is extremely important to visualize, so make sure you're looking at all the illustrations of the organs, where they are located, and what their general appearance and placement is in the body. Obviously, we start here with the head and neck anatomy and progress through the body. Ultimately, most of the digestion takes place in the abdominal cavity, so below the diaphragm. And so, again, keep that in mind as you're studying this topic and looking at all the pictures and reading this in the book. Now, so let's kind of trace the path of that sandwich that you're eating from the beginning, from the oral cavity all the way to the end, to the anal canal. Okay, so this is a brief overview of all the organs. This is by no means comprehensive discussion of every single component, every single part that takes place throughout the complex system of digestive organs. Again, we start here with the oral cavity in the mouth. Again, we have our teeth and the tongue and the saliva and the muscles of chewing, muscles of mastication. Remember, muscles like temporalis and masseter and buccinate and others to help you physically break down the food, do that mechanical processing. And as you're swallowing the food now goes deeper into the pharynx, back of the throat area, and continues then into the esophagus, which is the hollow muscular tube that connects your pharynx to the stomach. The esophagus is subdivided essentially to two parts. The upper 1/3 of the esophagus is skeletal muscle, where you kind of consciously can control the movement of the food as you're swallowing it. And the rest, the other 2/3, is all smooth muscle, where you begin the process of peristalsis, which is the smooth muscle contractions that move the food along throughout the GI tract. So as the esophagus empties the food into the stomach, there's going to be this LES, or lower esophageal sphincter, that needs to open up. That sphincter allows the food to progress into the stomach. Keep in mind the stomach is a J-shaped organ that so once LES opens and food falls into the stomach, there the acid, the hydrochloric acid of the stomach, together with enzymes and other digestive juices, can start to break down the food further. Now, the stomach consists of multiple different named components. The first part, where the food ends, essentially is the cardia. That's the sort of the smaller upper portion of the stomach connected to the LES. And then this kind of rounded portion on top is the fundus, and then the rest of the body of the stomach. And the lower portion is the pylorus, which is connected to the pyloric sphincter on its way to the small intestine, the first part of small intestine, which is the duodenum. Now, again, the stomach consists of multiple layers of muscles placed in different kind of directions, all kinds of different endocrine and other active digestive cells. We'll look at that more when we look at the histology components here for the digestive tract. But for now, keep in mind again, the stomach starts the process of digestion. Many molecules are just beginning to get broken down in the stomach, right? Because it's a very early phase of digestion. And more digestion actually starts to really kick up into high gear in the small intestine, which is much longer, much more kind of complex, elongated organ. So once the food passes from the pyloric sphincter into the small intestine, as we notice, the small intestine again is named small due to the cross-sectional caliber kind of size of the intestine, right? It's actually a very long structure that is about 20 feet long at least in a human, and consists of three major components: duodenum, the shortest portion, and then much longer jejunum, and then ileum. Again, duodenum, jejunum, ileum. So in this order, the food should be progressing through the small intestine. Again, in comparison to large intestine, which is larger caliber, larger cross-sectional diameter, the small intestine is much longer. The large intestine is actually shorter, at around only 5 feet long. We're going to talk about additional anatomical features from small intestine next time, but essentially keep in mind, right, that small intestine's job is to dramatically increase surface area to allow absorption to take place of all the nutrients, of all the molecules, like carbohydrates and proteins and others. So there's all kinds of folds, intestinal folds and others, on the microscopic and on the gross level that you can visualize. And there are certain differences histologically between these areas, but for the most part, we're going to talk about what happens in the duodenum here when we talk about accessory organs and the placement of the pancreas and the liver in that area. And the rest, again, we'll talk about in histology. Moving on, once the small intestine ends, there's going to be another valve called the ileocecal valve. And when that opens, that connects us to the cecum, which is the first part of large intestine. Again, large intestine shares its space with the small intestine in the abdominal cavity. And basically, we start out with this kind of a pouch-like area, the cecum. The way you can recognize the cecum easily is that an appendix or this worm-like vestigial structure will be hanging off of the cecum often. And again, appendix serves no purpose for us other than present us with certain problems when inflammation occurs, when there's impaction of stool and kind of a progression of inflammatory response there. But overall, it's just basically this remnant evolutionary from other animals that used to use their appendix in some way in the digestive process. Now, so for us, it basically serves as like a landmark, not a true structure in terms of actual function. And then continuing up through the cecum, right, we have the ascending colon going on the way towards the liver. Once it reaches the liver, we have a turn towards the transverse colon, right? So we have that hepatic flexure, transverse colon meets the spleen, makes the splenic flexure, turns around, goes down, becomes descending colon, and then after descending colon, we actually have so sigmoid colon, and then after that, so sigmoid colon makes like a letter S positioning, and then we get to the rectum. Rectum, again, remember rectus, anything means straight, right? So it's kind of straight-like appearance of the large intestine, and then goes down into the anal canal where it meets two different sphincters, the external and internal anal sphincters, for voluntary and involuntary control of the bowel movement. So again, there is certain anatomical and kind of histological differences in appearance throughout these different areas. But keep in mind, most important is that once the food gets all the way to this area, this is essentially waste getting ready to be compacted, dehydrated, and ready for defecation, right, in the lower portion, especially in the sigmoid colon, the rectum, and these kind of descending colon areas, okay, depending on the situation and kind of the state of the person. Now, other things to keep in mind here is that anatomically, when you're looking at the abdominal cavity, you're thinking, okay, this is the placement of the organs in that body cavity. You can also think of it as peritoneum or peritoneal cavity, and this is the more correct, more sort of accurate way of describing this area in the abdomen. So there's two main features surgically that you'll see essentially, or through autopsy, is that there's going to be an omentum, which is kind of a blanket of fat, adipose tissue that covers and protects all the organs, also called as greater omentum. And that's the one we see at the very beginning. And once you retract that omentum and you kind of go through the different organs, you'll see that they're all, the small intestines, large and are all interconnected by this kind of fabric-like material with blood vessels and nerves. We call this material the mesentery. Okay, so if you remember mesenteric arteries from previous semester talking about the vasculature, the blood vessels, this word again comes back to us here to indicate to us we are in the digestive tract. The support tissue of the nerves and the blood vessels is the mesentery. The protective fat of the peritoneum is the omentum. Okay. One other thing to keep in mind also is that there is a set of specialized nerves in the digestive tract called the enteric nervous system, or ENS. These are separate from simple, from just kind of nerves in other parts of the nervous system. Obviously, they're all connected, but they are specifically in charge of the digestive functions, whether these are neuroendocrine functions or other functions. Essentially, we are keeping in mind here that the digestive system functions are quite complex, and after years of research, we have understood that there's a set of nerves and neurotransmitters specifically responsible for the digestive functions, whether these are like serotonin, leptin, neurokinin, neuropeptide Y, and others, and they are part of the ENS, of the enteric nervous system. Now, in order for the main digestive organs to do their job, we also have these accessory digestive organs that help us also to function properly and to allow the digestive system to operate seamlessly. So here I outlined the salivary glands, liver, and the pancreas. We will talk about salivary glands and pancreas more when we talk about the endocrine system, the different hormones, and kind of gland-like structures. Essentially, salivary glands are glands like the parotid gland, submandibular gland, and others, which are all very similar histologically. They are producing saliva, right? That's the liquid, water-based liquid that contains different enzymes and different molecules to help you break down the food mechanically when you're chewing it in the oral cavity. Right? Two main components chemically in the saliva is salivary amylase, which helps us to start to break down starch, type of carbohydrate, type of sugar, and lysozyme, which is more of an antimicrobial kind of a molecule to kind of defend against all kinds of bacterial infections, things like that, in the oral cavity. Lysozyme is also, by the way, secreted in tears to protect our eyes, and sometimes other areas. Again, the main organs here are the parotid, submandibular gland, and some other smaller salivary glands in the right next to the oral cavity. Also have the liver, obviously a very large organ here, a solid organ on the right hand side, kind of next to the stomach and right under the diaphragm. The liver is a very complex organ. We can have a very, very long discussion about different properties and functions of the liver, and we will come back to it histologically a little bit later on. But essentially, again, liver consists of liver cells, hepatocytes. These are cells that produce bile, produce hormones, albumin, clotting factors, and many other components necessary for normal survival of the person. Bile for us is going to be very important one to discuss here. This is the molecule that sort of bile acids that makes up the secretions needed to emulsify fat or help you break down fat after having a fatty meal. So when the fat goes into the duodenum, that fat needs to be mixed in with the bile acids to be broken down and absorbed properly by the body, because fat molecules are insoluble in blood and are very difficult to break down otherwise. So what happens is bile is produced by the hepatocytes. It essentially goes through the multiple bile canaliculi and ducts, eventually making its way to the storage, where the gallbladder takes that bile, stores it for a while, and once ready, the bile can be excreted through the common bile duct into the ampulla of water, which is an opening that joins them kind of with the major pancreatic duct inside the duodenum in the small intestine. And so during a meal basically, or after a meal, as the food progresses into the small intestine, that bile can be released there, along with pancreatic juices to help you break down different molecules. Again, bile specifically deals with fat, dietary fat type of food. Again, other functions of the liver and kind of more deeper discussion will be done later, and we'll talk about histology. Kind of, again, keep in mind that very, very important component besides the bile secretion is the fact that liver takes all the molecules that you have absorbed in the GI tract and through the hepatic portal system passes them to the liver, where enzymes inside hepatocytes process these nutrients and allow them then further to continue on their journey to the rest of the body, to all the cells. So any kind of food you're eating, that food, those molecules, after they're broken down, actually go to hepatocytes and are processed there with different enzymes. And those enzymes then allow the molecules to be in that form, ready to pass on to the rest of the cells. So this applies also to medications, to things like alcohol, and pretty much anything else that, as long as it goes through the digestive system, must pass through the liver on its way before going to other parts of the body. And the last component, the pancreas, again, we'll be coming back to that multiple times. Essentially, pancreas is that organ that lies behind the stomach, and the pancreas consists of both endocrine and exocrine components. When you think of exocrine, you should be thinking of actual glandular or gland-like tissue. So this is where digestive enzyme, this is where bicarbonate, the molecules comes in to help you either neutralize the acid in the duodenum or mix in overall as part of pancreatic juices with carbohydrates of the molecules to help them be broken down. And there's the endocrine component of the pancreas, which is the one where hormones like insulin, glucagon, and others are secreted in alpha and beta cells, and we'll talk about more next time. Essentially, this is the best way, the kind of simplified way to separate the two functions of the pancreas. Even though both are involved in helping you digest material, one is an exocrine gland-like component, means the secretions go into actual ducts, and one is an endocrine component, means the secretions go directly into the bloodstream because they are hormones. Again, make sure to review the anatomy here, all the naming and features in the book, and look at all the illustrations for all these organs. And then we'll continue on with more of the physiological components next time.